Good evening. We have some questions to start our work based on the first two meetings. We would like comment and clarification on the following. The elimination of mind as a synonym for God is clearly understandable when used to express a creative source. But what about its use in the sense of, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus? All right, you do understand then that a creative principle cannot be an effect. Now, be clear in your own mind that mind is an effect, that there is someone, which I am, which has a mind and has a body. Think of that. Do you have a mind? Do you have a body? Then there is a you. And there is a mind and a body, but you possess the mind and the body. Therefore, mind is an effect just as body is effect. Therefore, mind cannot be causative. But when we speak of, let this mind be in you, which was in Christ Jesus, we are not saying mind at all. We're saying, let this state of consciousness be in you. The same state of pure spiritual consciousness. Let this pure spiritual consciousness, which Jesus demonstrated, be your state of consciousness. That is what that statement means. It means that we are to demonstrate in our individual experiences the same perfect spiritual state of consciousness that the Master did. God is no respecter of persons, and actually there is only one consciousness, and it is infinite. It is spiritual. But there are states and stages of development or demonstration. And of course, the person coming into a spiritual way of life is beginning to show forth something of that state of consciousness, which is Christ consciousness. But as you progress on this path, ultimately you rise higher and higher and higher until your friends and relatives begin to notice that you are of a different state of consciousness than you were last year. And as you continue, it is possible that the entire world begins to think of you in terms of Christ consciousness. It has happened in our lifetime. Many have risen in their experience to where they were known by the people of the world to be Christly, or to be Christ-like, or to show forth spiritual consciousness or Christ consciousness. Oh, so many in this past century have attained a great measure of that mind which was in Christ Jesus. That is, that state of developed spiritual consciousness. We must not be tricked by the use of words, because words seldom mean what they seem to mean when we are interpreting them spiritually. And this happens to be one of those words. Mind really is a reasoning faculty. Mind is really something which we use in our reasoning processes. And so it couldn't be God. But it is God-given, and it is to be used for its rightful spiritual purpose, and not to be misused, as it often is, under the belief of good and evil. A person can use their mind for good purposes, and they can use their mind for evil purposes. So it can't be God. Why should a lapse in moral law strike a student on the path differently than an outright atheist? Now, that is a good point there, and it is one which I caution our students about over and over and over, and the higher they go in demonstration, the more I warn them about it. You see, a person of gross mentality, a person of material sense, can do almost anything they want and get away with it. And the more gross they are, the more materialistic they are, the less reaction they get from their wrong actions. And that is why, on the materialistic plane, you can find people who have attained fame, and many who have attained fortune, who are about as unethical, dishonest, mean, unjust, unloving, hateful as you can possibly imagine, and yet they seem to suffer no ill effects from it. But you let a person on the spiritual path just deviate that much, and you watch the rebound, the reaction that they get from it. They suffer. They suffer more than if they'd committed an actual crime. That is why, as you develop on the spiritual path, you become sensitive. Sometimes you become so sensitive that you can feel the very atmosphere, and you know when you're in an atmosphere of purity, I'm speaking of spiritual integrity, or when you're in an atmosphere that violates it, and you can feel the reaction upon yourself. Sometimes you can go into the atmosphere of a spiritually developed person and be ill and come out well. On the other hand, you can be well, and if you're on the spiritual path and you go into the atmosphere of a person giving off immorality or dishonesty, you can come away ill. So quickly do you feel the effects. Now, spiritual integrity goes a lot further than just obedience to the moral law, to the Ten Commandments. You will soon find that a person will have great difficulty in violating those Ten Commandments if they're on the spiritual path. But that's only the first step in their spiritual growth. When students go into spiritual work, they are up against temptations far greater than anything that's mentioned in the Ten Commandments. And it isn't often that they fail for violation of any of those Ten Commandments. If they fail, there's something else behind it. Some students go into spiritual work and find almost an immediate prosperity, and with it, an immediate personal popularity. And that does more harm to the spiritual student, or can do more harm, than almost any other crime. And the reason is that if you accept that personal adulation or that popularity as being personal to yourself, you sink under that very thing, for that isn't the way it's meant. In the same way, prosperity usually brings with it tastes for indulgence, and if that isn't watched, that can destroy one. Remember that it isn't money that destroys one, it isn't prosperity. It's what it does to a person in the way of taking their mind away from their spiritual activity. That's where this very question applies. Other students go into spiritual work, and they find that one of the first things that happens to them is a loss of their possessions or income, and they go through severe periods of lack. And this can be very, very disastrous. Why? Because they believe, perhaps, that because they're in spiritual work that God should be taking care of them, forgetting that there is no God to do that. It is their developed state of consciousness. They haven't yet attained it. Or they may feel that because they're going through lack, that God has deserted them. And then they develop a fear of being outside the realm or kingdom of God. And they sink by the wayside, some of them. You can sink through a period of lack, or you can sink through a period of prosperity, if you do not realize that neither the prosperity nor the lack has anything to do with your spiritual activity of that moment. It has to do with what particular lesson you need at the time. We are always drawing unto ourselves the lessons that we need. Now, one of the most important lessons that we need on the spiritual path is this. We need to learn that God is our reliance. And this makes us take our gaze and our dependence away from man whose breath is in his nostril. Well, of course, at first you automatically believe that those you are benefiting should be grateful. Those you are benefiting will be grateful. Those you are benefiting should be the ones to provide your income. And if you persist in that, you won't be in spiritual work very long. Because while it's true from the standpoint of the patient or the student that they should be active in gratitude, recognition, loyalty to the source of their good or the avenue through which it comes, that is their demonstration, not the workers. The worker's demonstration is, God is my supply. God is my grace, and I dare not look to man whose breath is in his nostril. Then, when that lesson has been learned, whatever the patient or student shares with you is wonderful and represents their demonstration, but not yours. Your demonstration has been made by your contact with God. And if you never had a patient or a student, your demonstration of supply would be just as infinite. Now, in the same way, the period of lack comes to bring to us lessons of this nature if we haven't learned them. I have brought this out to students before, that I had to go through 3 periods of demonstration on the subject of supply. The first one because I believed that since I was in God's work, God would take care of my supply. And for a short time it really seemed that that was happening. But somehow it petered out, and God didn't seem to be too much concerned about my supply, although I was still in God's work. But the second unfoldment that came was to the effect that supply is a matter of instantaneity. It is here and it is now. And again, that seemed to be the answer to the subject, and supply sprang up again, only to peter out again. And then in this third experience, the revelation dawned, the one to which I am trying to lead every student, to the nature of God as I. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the bread and the wine and the water. Not you, I. And not me, but you out there saying, I. Now that is your bread, meat, and wine. That is your resurrection. That is your teacher. I am. When I realize that, then my supply has nothing to do with patience. It has nothing to do with gratitude. It has nothing to do with students. It has nothing to do with anybody out here. It has to do with the fact that in the beginning, before Abraham was, God incorporated in the eye of my being everything necessary for my unfoldment from now until doomsday. Therefore, all I have to do is let it flow, being sure always never to look to man whose breath is in his nostril, never to expect it from man, never even to expect it from God. To know that God in the beginning incorporated it in my being, and all I have to do is spend it. Even though I have but 10 cents, let me spend that, or half of it. I will be fulfilling the law. For unto him that hath shall be given. From him that hath not shall be taken even the little that he has. Therefore, if I ever say, I have not, I have made the law unto myself. If I ever say, I lack, I have made unto myself a law, and I will suffer from it. I'm that sensitive that I will suffer. But when I realize that the word I means God, the word I is the very nature of God being, and that this word I in the midst of me, which is closer to me than breathing, nearer than hands and feet, this I is the source of my supply, the source of my health, the source of my friendships, the source of my contacts with students. I don't have to advertise for them. I don't have to seek them. I only have to live at the center of my being, and then find my own shall come to me. Those whom I can bless, those who can bless. We are drawn to each other. But if I look to you for anything but the privilege of sharing with you, I cut myself off from my God. I set you up out there as my God. Do you see how wrong that is? Even if I set up the word gratitude, I set up something that isn't God. All I must know is I. I in the midst of me is mighty. I am the bread and the wine and the water. I am the resurrection. I am life eternal. I will not get life eternal. Even God can't give me life eternal. God gave me himself. And to know that God gave me himself is my life eternal. Never dependent on a man, a teacher, a book. No. And that is why our students are taught. It isn't the teacher who is going to give you life eternal, and it isn't the book that will give you life eternal. These books and this teacher will carry you back to the I within your own being until you realize it. When you realize it, you don't need man, woman, or child. You don't need book. You need nothing. You have found that you know him aright. You'll never know God aright until you know I, in the midst of you, am he. Now that is why we're sensitive, because every bit of a dependence out here, whether it's on money, on satisfaction, on gratification, on companionship, is a violation of this. Now, we're entitled to health, harmony, wholeness. In fact, it's our birthright. We're entitled to companionships. We're entitled to the good of the world. But do you know the only sin there is according to the wisdoms of the infinite way? The only sin is to desire these. To desire good is sin. Because it's accusing God of leaving you in lack. It's accusing God of having separated you, or being responsible that you haven't your good. We do not desire. We understand that I embody, I embrace, I include within this infinite I my good. And then we let it flow. So you come to me and I come to you, and we sit here and we share gloriously in spiritual awareness. That's the joy of life, that we can share in spiritual awareness. But if I would accept the belief that I need you, I would be in as bad a position as you would be if you ever believed that you need me. Don't ever do that. All you need is God realization. You don't come here because you need me or my books. You come here to share the developed consciousness which I'm showing forth. But if it weren't here, that wouldn't deprive you of anything. Because as long as you know the I of your being, you'll find another book or another teacher, or it'll be revealed to you from with your own being, and you won't ever need a teacher or a book. Never for a moment give in to the belief that you need person, place, thing, that you need book, that you even need God. You don't need God. I and the Father are one. The place whereon I stand is holy ground. All I need is the realization of God. For God is never separate from where I am. Although there may be times when human sense may deprive me of that awareness, then I must return again into meditation as the Master did. Go away for 40 days. Go away for 40 nights, or 400. Not to find God. Oh no, you take God wherever you go. But to awaken to the realization of omnipresence, omnipotence, omniscience. May we have the views of the infinite way on the metaphysical concept that help cannot be given to one under medical care. This, of course, could not be true. This could not be true, that help cannot be given to one under medical care, for this reason. When you turn to the Christ, you can't turn from where you're going to be tomorrow. You have to turn from where you are now. Now, supposing you are in prison, can you wait until you are freed before you turn to God? No, you're apt to say, by that time I may not need God. Here, where I am in prison, is where I need God. And right you are. In prison, in the hospital, in the mental institute, wherever you are at any given moment is when you should be reaching for the Christ. And if not you, your patient, your student. Now, you don't believe for a moment that spiritual truth would say to you, first get good before I can help you, or first get healthy before I can help you, or first lose your dependence on matter. Heavens, heavens, heavens. No. God has more pleasure in one sinner redeemed than in the 99 that do not need Him. God would have more pleasure in 99 people lifted out of a hospital than the one who doesn't need a hospital. Always remember this. The place from which we have to demonstrate God is here and now. where I am. Now, if you come to me, I have no right to ask you if you're living in sin. That's none of my business. You have turned to the Christ, and I am to say to you, here it is. Pick up your bed and walk. No questions asked about whether you're in sin or whether you're in medicine. What this question probably refers to is this: that the person who continues to try to mix medicine and God will not succeed. They are a house divided against themselves. They are placing their faith in two things. One, that medicine will help me, and the other in the statement that I don't need help, for I and the Father are one. You can see that that will not work. Therefore, students on the spiritual path must bring themselves as quickly as possible to a point of decision. Do I serve God or mammon? Am I placing my faith two ways or one? And as rapidly as possible, take your stand on the side of spiritual truth. Now, there are those who have been in some form of metaphysical work for years and years and years, and they keep volleying back and forth between God and medicine and never seem to arrive anywhere. And there are others who have been taught that it's all right to have a prayer so that God will be led to give you the right medicine or do the surgery in the right way. And of course they never do come to a complete living in and through God. But never believe for a moment that a person cannot be healed who is having medical care, because that would immediately eliminate all of the people who through accident or disease or something have been brought low, and we would have to tell them, first get well and then we can take care of you. By that time they wouldn't be too eager for it. No, in the actual experience of the infinite way, when I am asked for help, I do not concern myself with where you are in spiritual consciousness. I take hold and go to work, and wherever it's possible, you respond. But that doesn't mean that you can go on for the rest of your life just having a treatment today and a bottle of medicine tomorrow and expect that you are making the real spiritual progress. Sooner or later, you come to a place of decision. But please, if you're an Infinite Way student, do not refuse help to anyone, regardless of their religion or lack of religion, regardless of their moral status or their medical status. As a matter of fact, you'd be surprised how many fine doctors have been healed through Infinite Way work. From my experience, I observed that women are in the preponderance in metaphysical movements. Is this because women are more spiritually minded and more receptive? No. No, definitely not. Most assuredly not. The main reason that there are more women in all church activities, more religious activities, is that women are mothers, and they're looking for something that will protect their offspring. They're not so concerned about themselves, but oh, that darling baby, it must be protected from sin, disease, death, lack, limitation, and a mother is going to give up her life to save that child from even stubbing its toe if she can, and if she can find a God to do it, to entrust the child who she will. And therefore women are in the majority in seeking religious teachings. Now, men will be in the majority when women demonstrate that they have found God. when they bring demonstration into their home, the men will be on the bandwagon so fast because they also have babies, only their baby is usually business or government. Men really are seeking harmony in their business, and above everything, I'm sure that men look to governments and look to the day when there will be righteous government in governmental circles. And for that reason, men have a deeper passion for truth with a less selfish purpose. Women want it mostly for their children, but men more for the general good, for the universal good, for everybody. Women in their early experience seldom think about the world's good. It's my babies. Oh, my babies. When they find it, though, the men will follow. Do you consider it advisable or important for infinite way students to curtail the reading of newspapers? Oh, I could be so mean. Do you really mean newspapers or comic sheets and sport pages? I think that one of the most important things for people who really have a devotion to the ideals of freedom, justice, equity in life, I believe they owe it to themselves to read at least one or two or three newspapers every day. But more especially the editorial page, even if they never get to any of the rest of it. Be posted on what's happening so that when you go to the polls to vote, you don't vote merely because your family is Democratic or Republican or socialistic, but you vote because you've come to a conviction that this candidate or this party really means well for the welfare of the world. And you can't do that without a lot of spiritual praying for guidance and being posted on the issues of the day and the men and women that are in public life of the day. Certainly, there is no benefit to anybody on the spiritual path to be concerned with that front page headline or the scandal or the comic pages or the sport pages. I don't mean that they're barred out. Some of those things are part of life. What I mean is they're not of importance to us. We don't have to read ads except when we're out to purchase something. But we must be posted on the events of the day. Why do you think that there has been a World War I, II, and III? Only one reason. You cannot make the citizens of this world read newspapers. They buy them, but they don't read the news place, which is the editorial page. Or if they do, they read their favorite parties. They'll read, if they're Republicans, they'll read all the Republican paper says. If they're Democrats, they'll read all the Democrats say, and then blindly go to the polls, instead of reading for awareness, for knowledge, realizing that no matter which side they read is biased and prejudiced, and that you have to read between the lines in order to know what's what. And then when you go to the polls, you have an opportunity of perpetuating free government. If you don't, always remember that 51% of the vote controls. And if 51% of the people do not go to the polls enlightened, it's the 51% of unenlightened ones that control the lives of the enlightened ones. Certainly read the newspapers, but read the news, and the news that affects world conditions. It doesn't bother us who murders who or who divorces who, but it does really mean something to know whether or not we have a good international policy, whether or not we have good candidates along that line. I think that's important. It has always been in my life. I will say that The news of the world is one of the important things in my daily life, and has been since 1909, when I stood on a street in London and realized that the world was being threatened that day with a war. The war that came in 1914 was threatened in 1909. That's the first time that I awakened to the fact that wars could really come again in world history. I thought we'd outgrown all that, and here was the English fleet and the German fleet lined up against each other in the North Sea and all ready to go. Wiser heads prevailed at that time, and it didn't happen. But it happened in 1914, and it's been happening ever since. An enlightened people would not have permitted it. Governments couldn't have gotten away with it if there had been an enlightened public. My idea is then that we should enlighten ourselves spiritually and make it practical in human affairs. This was answered. Is the experience of psychic phenomena an indication of progress on the spiritual path and an essential part of spiritual unfoldment? Are some individuals more susceptible to this type of experience? Psychic phenomena is a positive retrograde step on the spiritual path and can do more harm to the student than anyone can imagine. Yes, some individuals are more susceptible. Those who are more mental than spiritual are more susceptible to the psychic experience. You see, there are two worlds beyond the physical world. There is a mental realm and there is a spiritual realm. This mental realm is made up of what we call human experiences. But it can be human experiences of the past as well as of the present. And it can be human experiences of the future. Or it can be human experiences of those on this plane of life or those who have left this plane of life. Now, what you must realize is this, that to pass on from this plane of life does not necessarily mean that you become spiritual entities. On the contrary, those who leave this life in a materialistic or mental state of consciousness begin their new life on that same plane. It is those who leave this experience on the spiritual plane that find that in leaving this plane, they've advanced 1,000 years in one day. But those who are of the materialistic or mental nature still remain materialistic and mental, and if you contact that realm, you are just contacting another phase of human existence. I can illustrate that to you in this way, that a man who thought he was on the spiritual path all of a sudden found himself hearing a voice. Well, this voice told him to buy some stock in a gold company, and he did. And then this voice told him to buy some stock in another gold company, and he did. And then it told him to go to a certain place and find a man who had a gold mine and buy an interest in that gold mine. And when he went there to find it, that's when he awakened. The man he was sent to find had died 40 years before, and nobody knew where the gold mine was located. Now, he had heard a voice, there's no question about that. But do you see the type of voice? It was psychic phenomena. It was a man, evidently, who had passed on, who was reaching him and telling him things of today that actually took place 40 years ago. And of course, all the money that was invested has not come back from any of those ventures, because they had to deal with something 40 years ago. Now, the still small voice doesn't tell you to invest in anything. On the other hand, when you are living in the spiritual life, you do receive impressions that make you give up this business and go into this one, or sell your securities at this time, or buy them at another time, not by advising you, but by illumining you, enlightening you as to conduct. It hasn't in mind what stocks you should buy or sell. It merely has in mind of keeping you poised spiritually, and then you interpret it on the human plane. Now, it is the same way a story is told by the man himself, who had this gift of psychic phenomena, and this was back at the time when William Jennings Bryan was running for president in 1896. And some man came to him and said, "Have you any idea who's going to win the election?" Well, it was just a general question, and he answered and said, "No, I haven't." "Well, if you learn, let me know." And thinking that it was just of casual interest, he did catch a flash that William Jennings Bryan was defeated. So he wrote this man. Of course, the man went out and manipulated the stock market, the gold market at that time, and made a lot of money. But this man, who tells the story on himself, says that he lost his gift for one whole year. Surely, we're not given gifts of any kind for commercial purposes, and it's the same thing. We're sensitive. We realize when some wrong use has been made of this, and even on that plane, it will not operate where there is integrity, as there is with this particular man. Now, when you are on the mental level, you are apt to contact that psychic level and have many types of experience you do not understand, but they're not spiritual. And sometimes they become difficult because they control you. People who have had experience with spiritualism or with using Ouija boards find very often that they cannot break that contact because it has gotten such a hold on them that something, somebody, somewhere is controlling them. In this spiritual work, let me assure you, you are not to be controlled by anybody. You are not to be controlled by anything. You are a free spirit. If you understand that God is the very spirit and soul of your being, you let nothing and nobody control you, nor do you open your consciousness to anybody's control or to anything. You open yourself only to God. To God and God only, and you'll never get into trouble. But the moment you start to come down looking for masters, the minute you start to come down looking for controls, you do not know what you're going to be up against. No, psychic phenomena is not necessary. There is never mistaking when you make contact with the Spirit of God within you. You'll never doubt it. Is a person who takes human footsteps faltering in spiritual reliance? To what extent should a student of the infinite way take the human footsteps? Well, let's understand this correctly. We are living a life here on earth, and what we're seeking is not to avoid it or to escape it, but to have spiritual illumination, spiritual guidance, spiritual protection accompany us along the way. Spiritually, there is a presence that goes before us to make the crooked places straight. But it doesn't stop us from taking those footsteps to follow where it has been before us. Actually, that means this. When it becomes apparent in my experience that there's to be a class in New York Do you not see that I must take certain human footsteps? There must be somebody here to provide a hall. There must be somebody here to receive enrollments. There must be somebody here to bank the money. There must be somebody here to pay the bills. These are human footsteps. I can assure you I haven't gone far enough to avoid those. I have gone this far that the Spirit of God is with me, and all of these footsteps are taken harmoniously, and a place is provided for us, adequate place, at a right figure. The help necessary is provided for us. If it isn't one, it's another. God always can raise up seed. So it would be if we are seeking employment, to place an ad in a trade paper or to answer an ad on the newspaper is a correct human footstep, but in and of itself it will not find employment for you, except in those rare boom times, unless what you do is empowered with the Spirit. You can advertise from now forever and not find your rightful place. You might find a position, but that's not a spiritual demonstration. The spiritual demonstration is placing you where you belong, doing that which is rightful for you to be doing, receiving adequate compensation. That doesn't always take place just by going to an employment agency or by placing an ad. But if you are living to the highest of your spiritual realization, and then answer an ad or place an ad or go to an employment agency, you will find that all the wrong doors will be closed in your face, and one rightful door will open unto you. So it is. If you have a business, you have to take the human footsteps of opening the doors. You must keep the business clean. You must keep your stock clean. You must keep the merchandise up to date. You can't avoid those human footsteps, but with spiritual guidance, you will do all of those things better than you ever did them without. Certainly, human footsteps are necessary in every single walk of our lives. Do you not see that our bills have to be paid just as promptly as your bills, or Macy's bills, or Saks' bills? Do you not see that when we go to print, we must have paper, we must have presses, or we must have machines? That's all part of human footsteps. The one thing that is certain is, when we are spiritually guided, we are led to the right sources for our supplies. We find the right quality, we find the right price. Yes, indeed, human footsteps are important. Why do the fruits of the Spirit so frequently not show forth in the lives of true students? What is the fruit of the Spirit? Well, the essence is in that last part. What is the fruit of the Spirit? It's never true, never under any circumstance is it true that the fruits of the Spirit do not show forth in the lives of true students. Indeed, they do. It all depends on what you are calling fruits of the Spirit. Now, there are those who believe that a Cadillac represents the fruit of the Spirit, or a vacation in Europe. No, the fruit of the Spirit may give you an 18-hour-a-day job, and one that doesn't permit of any vacations. The fruit of the Spirit does not always reveal itself in the ways of this world. And that is what we must be careful about. You see, in our early turning to God, now this is true of everybody, not of everybody, but I mean of people in all religious walks of life. They really turn to God for some improvement in their human experience. That's what originally drove people to invent a God. The crops weren't good, and so they needed a god to bring out better crops. The sun, the moon, and stars didn't behave properly, and they needed gods for those. Gods became necessary for everything that didn't satisfy man. So he invented gods to do those things for him that he wished done in his experience. Out of that came the myriad gods of old. Then came out of India the revelation of one God. That went from India to Egypt, where King Menotep IV became a disciple of that teaching of one God. And he went so far as to rule that all of the statues of all the other gods must be torn down. All of the banners honoring these other gods must be destroyed, and only one God could be honored. That was that old prohibition again, you know, and it had the same effect. Inside of 2 years, they not only built those statues again, but they threw that king out on his ear. Now, it so happened that King Menotep IV had a close friend who also learned this secret of one God, and we learn in Scripture that he fled to Ur of the Chaldees. And he is the man we know as Abraham, the father of the Hebrew race, the man who founded a new race dedicated to the worship of one God. Of course, in those early centuries, the Hebrews remained steadfast to it when they could. When temptation got too strong, they also worshiped Baal and a few other gods. But on the whole, they were held by their prophets to the worship of one God. But unfortunately, they went to that God for the same reason that people went to the other dozen gods, to get something for themselves that they felt they needed or they wanted. Gimme, gimme, gimme. The old story of going to God for something that we want, and of course eventually it doesn't work, and they had to raise up a Christ Jesus to teach them. Seek not ye what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink, or wherewithal ye shall be clothed. Your heavenly Father is the infinite intelligence of this universe that created it. He knows your need, and He's the divine love. It is His good pleasure to give you the kingdom. And so He introduced a new form of prayer, a form of prayer in which we did not ask for anything but our daily bread. And by daily bread, He did not mean food, because He referred to I as bread. I am the bread, the wine, and the water. So He was praying not for baker's bread, but for daily bread, for the staff of life, for the Word, for the realization of God. And so He gave the world a whole new concept of prayer. More important, of course, He gave the world a whole new concept of God. Because here is the Hebrew God afar off, often pictured as the old gentleman with a white beard sitting on a cloud. And even though that may not have been the conviction of many of them, nevertheless, God was an image in their own mind, and they were turning to it to get something for themselves rather than turning to God in the realization, you already know my need, and it is your good pleasure to give me the kingdom, and therefore I rest in this word. So Christ Jesus gave us a new concept of God. He revealed to us the I, so that now we need only know that I already am. I already am the bread of life. I already am the power of resurrection. I already am the way and the truth. I already am a fortress high tower. I abide in the secret place of the Most High. I, in the midst of me, is mighty. I, the kingdom of God, is within me. And it's all embodied in that word, I. The divine I, the infinite I, the invisible I, to which we need not pray. For it is the infinite intelligence, the creative principle of this world, and it is the maintaining and the sustaining principle of this world. Our prayer is an abiding in this word. Rest in the word. That one Hebrew prophet saw that. Others did, but this one in particular voiced it. They have only the arm of flesh, and then the Hebrews rested in this word, and the enemy fought among themselves and destroyed themselves